Chapter 6 traced how science gave us mastery over the natural world. But mastery without meaning is also a question. What should we actually do with what we know? That question belongs to ethics, and ethics, too, is failing. In January 2002, the Boston Globe published a story revealing a staggering institutional failure. Investigators uncovered a pattern of systematic containment involving over 100 victims across 3 decades. At the center of that containment was Cardinal Bernard Law, one of the most powerful religious figures in America. Instead of reporting the abuse to the police, he quietly moved the predator from parish to parish, where the cycle continued. This is a textbook case of institutional capture. When an institution's first priority becomes its own survival, rather than the mission it was created to serve, it has been captured. The deepest betrayal was that an institution claiming ultimate moral authority actively chose to protect its own reputation over the safety of the children it was built to serve. If governance is civilization's steering function, the economy is provisioning, and science is truth-seeking, then ethics is the compass. It is the orienting function that tells us what our power is actually for. When the compass breaks, the other functions lose the ability to self-correct. Without an orienting sense of value, failures in governance and science compound because the system no longer recognizes it has gone off course. For most of human history, religion was our primary technology for moral coordination. It provided a framework that allowed us to scale trust and cooperation far beyond our immediate family. It built the physical and cultural infrastructure for shared meaning. Communities were synchronized through ritual, and ethics were taught through lived exemplars rather than strict calculations. But in institutionalizing the sacred, that system began to break down through 4 specific mechanisms. First is dogma, which closes inquiry and splits the world strictly into believer and heretic. Second is capture, where sacred authority is subordinated to serve institutional power. Third is tribalism. This happens when morality shrinks to mere loyalty. Good comes to mean only what benefits us, and evil means whatever threatens our specific group. And finally, secular disorientation. The Enlightenment successfully liberated society from rigid dogma, but it failed to replace the lost infrastructure of shared meaning. So modern humanity is caught in a vacuum. Traditional institutions obsess over their own self-preservation, while secular systems drift into moral relativism with no robust shared conception of the good. To see the terrifying real-world consequences of this breakdown, we only have to look at the 1947 partition of India. A single political line was drawn, immediately turning religious identity into a trigger for mass violence. For a survivor named Fatima, the horror was intensely personal. She had lived alongside Hindu neighbors her entire life, but overnight, those familiar faces became lethal threats. The cruelty of the partition was local and intimate. The mobs consisted of ordinary people, weaponized by a sudden demand for absolute institutional belonging. We see a modern corollary in the rise of ISIS, which demonstrates how tribalism can completely capture and distort the sacred. Their actions were defined by medieval cruelty, yet they employed highly sophisticated modern tools, like social media and encrypted messaging, to recruit and coordinate. When identity is reduced to an absolute binary of in-group versus out-group, compassion becomes conditional, stopping at the boundary of the group. Biologist E.O. Wilson diagnosed our human condition precisely. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. That growing gap between our exponential technical power, like artificial intelligence and CRISPR, and our stagnant ethical maturity has become a primary driver of civilizational existential risk. And systems inevitably fail when they ignore ethics. The 2008 financial crisis is a perfect example of an incentive-driven collapse, one that actively rewarded trading volume over economic stability. The Montreal Protocol succeeded because it shifted the entire economic landscape. Chemical companies turned toward alternatives, because the treaty ensured no one could gain a competitive advantage by sticking to the old destructive ones. Ethical outcomes depend more on these structural guardrails than on personal piety. When our institutions reward extraction, virtue becomes a competitive disadvantage, meaning we must redesign our systems to make integrity the path of least resistance. We do have starting points. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, forged in the aftermath of global catastrophe, proves that humanity can still establish a shared moral floor across incredibly diverse traditions. Our civilizational compass is heavily damaged, but it is not destroyed. There are still stars to navigate by, provided we learn to see them together. Forging a truly new compass will require something older than written law and significantly larger than the self. But before any new ethical framework can hold, civilization must first recover a shared sense of what is real, and that is the crisis we turn to next.